Due to the relatively simple macro involved, Scouts opening is often the best strategy for newer players to learn. Build orders for Scouts can be very forgiving in terms of efficiency, as it's not as timing dependent as Drush or Men-at-Arms openings. Usually the goal with Scouts is to get a few of them out to harass the opponent while you wall and add farms with Horsecollar. Compared to an opponent who made an archery range, mining camp, and blacksmith soon after reaching Feudal Age, the Scouts player should have a few earlier farms, even when accounting for the earlier walls that the Scouts player should have made. After Herdable's hunt and forage runs out, the only way to collect food is by adding farms. Only one farmer can collect from a single farm, so food income is limited to how many farms you can produce. Most competitive land maps are balanced by the fact that there aren't too many animals for you to take, so you're forced to make farms if you want to reach Castle Age with a healthy economy. Getting earlier farms will help you to reach Castle Age with a balanced economy so you can add knights and more town centers more smoothly. This is the fundamental rule to Scouts opening. Add farms every 60 wood for a strong Castle Age follow-up. Let's take a look at how Scouts can be used. You start with a Scout Cavalry most of the time, and there are many uses for it, even in Dark Age. Scouting the map, pushing deer, blocking enemy villagers, attacking the enemy scout, picking off unloomed villagers, stealing a boar, and dying to TC are all things that you can do with a Dark Age Scout. Scouts have their stats automatically boosted when reaching Feudal Age, so if you're up faster than your opponent, sometimes you can pick off their slower and weaker Dark Age Scout using this timing. For this same reason, you should be careful when scouting your opponent's base if you're up to Feudal Age late. There are a few ways to play Scouts opening, with the most common one being where you just make around 3 of them while protecting yourself with walls so you can reach Castle Age fast with a strong economy. Since Scouts are fairly weak against Men-at-Arms, Spearmen, and Archers, using their mobility to pick off isolated units is where they shine. The fact that your opponent can't split up his army, otherwise you'll pick off the weaker army with your Scouts, can make defending easier as you only have to track one big army. Making extra layers of house walls or a tower to defend a key area are both ways in which you can repel enemy units if you can't fight them directly. Scouts may be weak, but if you get enough of them, you can still take good fights simply by having mobility. Instead of stopping at 4 Scouts, you can continue to produce them and take a big fight once you have bloodlines. This can sometimes surprise your opponent if he just thought you were making a small number and then trying to get to Castle Age. Thinning out an opponent's archer mass will really hurt any kind of crossbowman follow-up. On maps where it is difficult to wall, making more military is usually better. Another thing worth mentioning is that you should try to get your walls up before moving out with your Scouts if both you and your opponent open Scouts. If you show up your opponent's base and they're walled, and then his Scouts show up at your base and you take some economy damage, your opponent will be in a significantly better position. While your opponent is open, you can continue to add Scouts, as you'll have many chances to pick off villagers that are going to a woodline or gold, or maybe there will be an overchop somewhere. Once both players are walled in a Scout's mirror, it can be a race to get to Castle Age, so don't sleep on adding farms every 60 wood, and don't forget your blacksmith. As I mentioned earlier, food income in this game is limited by the number of farms you have. Since it takes a while to get a high enough farm count to constantly produce Scouts and villagers, going full Scouts can be tricky. Unlike crossbowmen, light cavalry do not have the same impact in early Castle Age due to a few reasons. The first is that they're still a melee unit with relatively low attack. When your opponent is walled, they still probably won't be able to get in. The second reason is that they lose against knights and crossbowmen, which are the 2 most common Castle Age units. Light cavalry do have their place though. If a map is particularly open and you make a bunch of Scouts that are still alive, then light cav can work while you transition to knights. The 2 notable civs that can really make this play work are Magyars with cheaper Scouts and free attack upgrades, and Turks with free light cav upgrade and +1 pierce armor. Usually if you're considering going for light cavalry, you have to think about if going for knights instead would accomplish the same thing but better. To make this decision, you need to understand the advantages and disadvantages of going light cavalry. Light cavalry can be built up during Feudal Age and on the way to Castle Age, which gives you army earlier. This lets you take some map control earlier than knights, which could thwart an opponent's castle drop or forward siege workshop attempt. This map control can also be used to get your own siege workshop forward as soon as possible. Knights are already fast, but light cav being able to outspeed them means that they might get to the right place at the right time more often to pick off villagers and other units. The biggest advantage light cavalry have over knights is their conversion resistance. Light cav resist conversions and have an attack bonus against monks, so they're almost always better against mass monks. This makes light cav openings actually quite common on Arena, as they are strong enough to fight unupgraded spearmen while also being great at picking off monks. Light cavalry's pure food cost can also be a deciding factor, as if you don't have access to gold but still want to make cavalry, then they're your only option. With the same 2 pierce armor as knights, you can still potentially fight crossbowmen if you start making them mid-castle age once you have a good farm economy going, but I'll bring us back to the point about food requiring farms. If you try to go light cavalry as your opening, then you can't boom properly with multiple town centers, as you just won't have enough farms. When going knights, you can just send 12 villagers to gold, and then you have a good eco balance for 2 stable knight production. For light cav, you have to slowly add farms as you have the wood to do so, which takes time. Since scouts play often leads you to get to castle age fairly fast, you simply won't have the farm count to sustain light cav production with such an early uptime. This also means that if Feudal Age was extended, such as the case where if the map was super open and you made a lot of scouts throughout Feudal Age, you have enough farms to properly support light cav production. Taking into account if your economy can support production, and if light cavalry would be better than knights, hopefully now you can make a more informed decision as to which cavalry unit to go for. Next up is the final unit in the scout line, the Hussar. The Hussar is the king of post-imp. With decent stats, great mobility, and pure food cost, they're the most cost-effective unit to spam in the late game. Their mobility lets you pick off siege units, raid villagers, and get your army where it needs to be to defend fast. Though Hussars are usually not made as the opening unit in early imp, it can be a great second unit to fully tech into after your initial gold unit has all of its important upgrades. The reason that you won't usually see Hussar as the imp opening is simple. Hussars lose to Arbalesters, Cavalry Archers, Hand Cannoneers, Champions, Halberdiers, Cavalier, Camel, and almost every unique unit. This is almost every unit in the game, so with this in mind, you need to open with something else a lot of the time and then add Hussar as a meat shield later. One of the best uses for Hussar is for raiding to come back in a game. If you get into your opponent's economy with Hussar, you may stall his frontal push as he deals with the raids. If you constantly raid, then you may buy enough time to get to a good villager count and stabilize. If your civ gets Hussar, you almost always want to work towards them eventually if you're playing on an open map, as mobility to control the map wins games. Since Hussars only cost food, they become even more valuable when wood is running low. With crop rotation, you can convert 60 wood into 550 food, so wood actually becomes significantly more valuable in the ultra late game. This is also why you should only sell food at bottomed out prices if the wood is drying up. Hussars are a great addition to any army, but are especially useful when paired with cavalry archers. Since both units are fast, you can take a fight anywhere on the map with a full strength army and then retreat the cavalry archers if the Hussar all die. Anytime you can kill gold units with food units in post-imp is a win. And that just about does it for this one. Scouts opening is the easiest to learn and promotes greedy or defensive play, but can also be used aggressively on very open maps. Light cav have their uses, but are often overshadowed by knights, and Hussar are arguably the best unit in post-Imperial Age. Though a bit underutilized in Castle Age, this unit line definitely gets a fair amount of use.